Craig and Rebecca to talk about the Renters' Right Bill. So it's quite a significant change, as the title suggests, that it's going to change the, relationship between how landlord and tenants interact. Craig and Rebecca is very hot on regulation, so I've today invited them to come and give us an update on what's the proposed change and how we can react from it. So I'm just going to turn off my mic and camera, but I'll be listening the whole time. So if you need any help, just give me a shout. There's nobody speaking after you, so you can speak as long as you like. But I've planned this for maximum 1 hour, so it's okay if you overrun. All right. So yeah, the floor is yours.
Fantastic. Thank you, Jackie. Hi, everybody. You may notice that I'm actually sat in bed at the moment, and I have to apologise. I had a skydiving accident on Monday and I've broken my leg. So I'm actually doing this Zoom from my bed at home whilst Becky is in the office. So I apologise for that. So moving on to the Renters' Rights Bill. So the Renters' Rights Bill, as it says there, is one of the biggest changes that's going to happen in this industry in the last 30 years. And with working in the industry for probably just a little bit less than that, we have already seen some massive changes in the industry anyway. But moving forward, these are going to be certainly eye-opening changes. I think the important thing to remember here is, if you use an agency, so say for instance you use ourselves, you are putting the onus on that agency. So it's really important now that you make sure that your agency is up to the required standard. They have done courses in the Renters' Rights Bill that will assist them in assisting you moving forward. Now, I do know that all of our staff had a refresher yesterday, if I'm correct, Becky, yesterday?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. So they all had their refreshers yesterday, just so that it is completely in the forefront of their mind and that everything is very fresh within their heads. So, bearing in mind that this is due to come in towards the end of this year, nothing set in stone as of yet. And we do know that there has been some pushback from certain areas of government and things like this. But the long and the short of it is going to come in, and it's all going to come in. And how they're going to police that and enforce it is one of the biggest things that we want to be able to get across to yourself as property investors and landlords yourselves. So with no further ado, what I'm going to do is I'm going to hand over to Becky and I'm going to jump in and out as Becky's talking, just so that I can expand on a few things and assist Becky in the presentation. Over to you, Becky. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Rebecca. I'm the Managing Director at G8 Property. And as Craig did mention, myself and our team are weekly having updates on different changes and different training on how this is going to affect our landlords and yourself, and trying to implement that now. So there's not going to be a massive change when it does come into place. So if you can see, the objectives at the moment is going to be rental sector landlords and the Ombudsman, discrimination and advertising, the property standards and the enforcement, what is going to be able to happen, changes to all the tenancies, the possession grounds changes, and the rent-to-rent repayment orders. So with the first section, the bill is going to abolish all Section 21s, and it will prohibit the use of rent increase clauses within your contracts. So you're not going to be able to do any rent increases until a Section 13 has been given, and then also you're not going to be able to do that only every year. The only thing that we did get out of the course yesterday as well, that the properties that are at the moment on market value, even if you do want a rent increase, you're not going to be able to rent increase above the market value. So at the moment, if you've got a property that's £600 and the market value is £600, the rent increase won't stand, even if you do serve a Section 13.
And can I just jump in there, Becky? It's very easy for a tenant to basically say no. They have a free site that they can go to say, no, I disagree with this. Am I right in saying that?
You are. And on the next point, where there's going to be the digital private rental sector database, on that database there is going to be sections on there where tenants can enforce changes from their rental and obviously complain about the landlords and the pricings, and they are going to have that facility given to them as well. So it's not just agents, it's not just landlords. The tenants are going to have that database as well to be able to go to the Ombudsman. There's going to be a ban on rental bidding. So if tenants are wanting to outbid each other, that's not going to be a thing. And then there's going to be more expansion on the rent repayment orders.
So breaking, can we just go back a page there, Becky? So breaking it down a little bit more, getting rid of abolishing the Section 21 is in our eyes, it's not really a big thing at the moment. Yes, we do use Section 21s. We tend to use Section 8s more often, but getting rid of the Section 21, providing that it's the tenants are paying, they're looking after the properties. We don't really use the Section 21 anyway, and I'm correct in saying that. Yes, the rent increase. Again, this is down to the property management company being able to manage the property to a very good standard. We can get an immense amount of money for a rental property, but you've got to ask yourself a couple of things. Ethically, is it good? No, not really, because it just gets yourself a bad name, and it will also get the landlord a bad name, even though that the tenant doesn't know who the landlord is. Just that the money grabbers, and that is how landlords and investors are seen, is that they're just out to make as much money as they possibly get. So the increasing in the rents, that's not a bad thing either, to be honest. And it makes the market more fair, more easy, and you get the same amount of money for the same type of property across the board. So if you go back 3 or 4 years and somebody said to me, how much would you get for a 2-bed mid-terrace, 2 up, 2 down? You'd automatically just say £450. But now, because there is no cap and there is a shortage of rental properties out there, that can range from £450 to £800, £900. And that's the variety that they're trying to get rid of at the moment, is that there are some landlords out there that are just jumping on the bandwagon and saying, hey, if I can get £900 for my 2-bed property, I'm going to get to £900 for my 2-bed property. But then they don't do anything about looking after the property, whether it be a broken window or damp and things like this. So the fact that these tenants are going to be able to report landlords easier, well, not just landlords, but agencies as well.
It is all about how much you're marketing a property for as well. So even if we think we can achieve more, we have got to market that property at market value.
Yeah, and that's a really good point. That is a really good point. The fact that Becky and I had a discussion probably a couple of weeks ago now about home improvements and the standard of the decent home standards and things like this. Last year within our portfolio, we had over 3,600 reported repairs. And when we actually broke that down sort of monthly, weekly, daily, we realized how much pressure we were putting on our staff to make sure that they meet our processes and procedures, because we don't want tenants in the houses, with repairs. And that is one thing that is going to become very tighter. The local authorities, and we're in a lucky position where both myself and Rebecca get on really, really well with our local authorities, and they have told us verbally to say that, as soon as a tenant reports a reported repair, they will be getting straight in touch with us to find out when that repair is going to be completed. For us, that's a good thing, because it means that we're able to maintain the houses to a really, really good standard. However, for them landlords and investors that don't want to do any improvements and all they want to do is, take the money, it's them that are going to get into trouble. And to give you a little example here, we have just recently heard of 2 fines that occurred. Becky, one was for bins, am I right in saying?
Yeah, the bins wasn't emptied, and there was a lot of rubbish that was building up and building up and building up. And
so even though it was a tenant issue and it was a tenant's not putting the bins out on time, the landlord still got a £30,000 fine.
Can I just add as well with that? Yeah, with the new bill, again, from the additionals that the training gave us yesterday, the tenant can also now, rather than reporting a repair to a landlord, to an agency, they can go directly to the council at the first port of call. Even if they've signed agreements with us or with the landlord, they can and will have the right to go direct to the local authorities. So then the local authorities will contact the agency or the landlord. And if the work's not done within a set amount of time, that's when the improvement notice do become effective. And then that's when the repayment order comes in, where a tenant doesn't have to pay the rent.
Yeah, I know that's something that has worried us as a business, that we always strongly try to encourage our tenants to contact us directly. Now, our tenants, they have an app on their telephone, and and it's an easy way for them to report a repair. They can send pictures, they can send videos, they type in a description. When that is sent to us, it comes through on my mobile phone as a business owner. It comes through on my mobile phone, and morning, noon and night I'll get a notification. But it also goes through to the staffs. So we want to try and really still encourage that, but you will always get tenants that will want to go straight to the local authorities. And it's them timelines that we're trying to iron out with the local authorities at the moment, how long they're going to give us and things like this. And that's something that they've said that they don't know at the moment. They don't know how long they're going to give us, because every job is going to be completely different. But if we're looking at, like it was last year, 3,600 reported repairs, that is probably where we're going to have to bring in and up our staffing levels to make sure that, we keep you as the landlord and the investor safe. And that's the important thing here, is that we protect you from any of these silly fines that the councils are being handed out. And just to touch on that, so previously all fines went to central government. So any fines that Barnsley Council handed out, they went to central government. So Barnsley Council never saw any of the money from these fines. Now, central government have said any fines that they issue can stay with local council. So now you can imagine how many fines the local authorities are raising, and very, very quickly, because they know that they are going to get the money. So that is one thing to keep in the back of your mind, that when the staff, whether it be our agency or any other agency in the area, certainly in South Yorkshire, when they raise a reported repair with you, is to act on it very, very quickly. Sorry, Becky, I jumped in there.
It's all right. I'll go to the next slide, just about the key changes. I know we've gone over a few, and there is additional slides with more information on there, but the current legislation is the Section 21 notice seeking possession is 2 months. That's going to be abolished. Section 8, there is going to be a lot more grounds on there. The problem with the Section 8 that's going to happen is the amount of time that it's going to take for the court proceedings. So because there is only one Section 8 that we can use, different grounds, the courts are going to be backlogged with how many different things they are. So that's going to be a lengthy process. There's no fixed term tenancy periods. It is just going to be periodic. The tenants can give 2 months notice. And this is the tricky bit. If a tenant signs up today, they can also give the notice today to move out in 2 months, and you have to accept that notice. So in effect, they're only staying in the property for 2 months. So what us as an agency are looking at now is how much it's costing our landlords to run through the credit checks and run through certain checks that we do for tenants if they are just going to be there for a short period of time. Landlords, you're not going to be able to refuse any pets. There is going to be time frames on what landlords and investors are given to be able to say why they don't want to accept pets and find out more information on what type of pet it is. Obviously, some people might say they want a bear. Obviously, there's going to be different clauses in that they can't have any pet. And there's only going to be agents that need to be part of the red registry scheme that can deal with any investors or. So the private rented sector database, a bit of information here now, and about the fines. There is going to be civil penalties of up to £7,000 for initial breaches, and then up to £40,000 and even a criminal prosecution if it is a continuous breach. Touching on a landlord or an investor that myself and Craig are aware of, have a property in the Barnsley area, got the property, did the work on it prior to Article 4, correct me if I'm wrong, Craig, and he then was given an improvement notice because the works that was initially picked up at the HMO licence inspection wasn't completed. So he ended up fighting with the local authorities. He has been given a £26,000 fine, and is still running that HMO illegally, and he is facing to be imprisoned for the offence that he's caused, and the tenants are still there. So it's not something that does get pushed to one side. The local authorities are really stepping up on that, basically because they have the powers to do so now, and they are going to make the money.
Yeah, the member of staff from Barnsley Council that was handling the case asked Becky and I to get involved to see if we could assist him in making the changes that he needed to make the property compliant. We agreed to help him. He decided not to take us up on our help, and the last I heard was it was going to court, and it looked like that he would be imprisoned for the offence. So,
sorry, I flicked too far. Again, touching on this, all landlords, and I did ask yesterday within the meeting as well, if agents can actually register their landlords onto the database, and that hasn't been passed as of yet. So it is going to be something where a landlord has to provide your agent or has to put this information into the database prior to any property being taken over by us, G8 anyway. We're going to make sure that every landlord has registered and can prove that, that is going to have to be done. Moving on to the next slide is the discrimination. I've gone too far again here. So in the rental sector at the moment, there can be a lot of discrimination about, we don't want benefits in our properties, we don't want pets, we don't want families with children. That is all going to stop. We cannot refuse anyone a property, and as long as your agent is doing the right checks on that person, then you should be okay. As for us, we've already got that in place now, so that it is across the board. If they're on DSS or they are on benefits, there will be affordability checks done to make sure that they can afford it, the property is what they want. And also you've got to look at if they have any disabilities. You're going to have to, if you are rented to that person, be prepared to make adaptations to the property if needed, because that's something that the council and the local authorities can impose you to do. You can't discriminate, and you can't say that you're not going to rent to these people. So that is a big thing as well. A lot of our agencies in our area don't want to accept DSS or big families. It's not something that we are going to be able to do anymore. Again, touching on the bidding law, tenants can challenge any properties. And this is what I found very fascinating yesterday. A tenant can challenge if a property is above market. And if it is, it can be taken to a tribunal, and the tenant doesn't have to pay until that tribunal is over. So if you've rented to them and you've signed the contract, but then there's a dispute, that tenant doesn't have to pay until the tribunal is completed. So it is going to be difficult if you've not got the right agents that are marketing it at the right price to start with, and the bidding laws for if you want to, I can get an extra 100 or I can get an extra 200, it's going to be difficult, and you could get fines and things like that.
And this is one of the things that we've just started a marketing campaign called a landlord rescue package. And within that landlord rescue package, we make sure that you as the landlord have all the relevant documents that you need to be a landlord and investor in our area. We then look at your property. We check it against HHSRS, which is the housing standards. We also include our own health and safety checks within that. And we also check your tenants. We make sure that all the tenants were issued the correct paperwork before they moved into the property, so that heaven forbid, we needed to evict somebody, then we have all the correct paperwork. But included in that, and this is something that a lot of people forget about, is that we make sure that you're getting the right amount of money for your property. That it's quite surprising when I go to these morning business breakfast meals, and there are management agents there that say that they haven't done rent increases for 4 and 5 years. But I can't understand how they're not acting for their landlord. They're thinking, well, the tenant's paying the money, the landlord's not said anything, so we're just leaving it as it is. But move forward another 6 months, they will only ever be able to do a maximum of a 5% increase in rent. So if the landlord turns around and says, well, I want it bringing in line with the government guidelines and the government standards, they will never be able to do that, because it's an existing tenancy agreement, and they will only ever be able to increase it by 5%, which 5% on £400 is not a great amount of money. So that they would never ever be paying, the tenants would never pay the actual going rate for that particular property. And I think it's more important now more than ever that we get landlords that haven't had increases up to the required standards before the Renters' Right Bill comes in, because it's going to be a lot harder to get you face value for your property when the Renters' Right Bill come in. Sorry, Becky, carry on.
It's all right. We have touched base on this, but again, it is tenants requesting the right to have pets, and you cannot unreasonably, without consent, obviously have or say no to pets.
I was given a really good example of that. So what is a good reason to say no to having pets? And the example that I was given was, if you've got a Great Dane dog and the person applying for the apartment was on an 18th floor flat, obviously, you know, it theoretically you wouldn't have a Great Dane living on the 18th floor of a block of flats, because there's nowhere for it to go to the toilet, and the size of the dog and the lifts and everything like this. So under that circumstances, you can actually reject that the property is unsuitable. However, if it is a little tiny Chihuahua dog that can easily be picked up and you know, carried and things like this, then you can't refuse. And I think this is also something that, you know, as a management company, we have to bear in mind. And a lot of this boils down to, if you've got 10 applicants that apply for a property, and 5 of them have dogs and 5 of them don't have dogs, as long as we can provide evidence that we weren't discriminating against them because they had an animal, we can still reject them. They just weren't the most suitable person for that property. And I think that's one of the key things here, is that as long as we can provide evidence that we're staying within the law, we can still reject in some circumstances.
And I think it's just about understanding. And again, this is the processes and procedures that you need to have in place, or your agents need to have in place. As long as there's the processes and procedures in place and the staff know what it is that can and can't be accepted, then you are going to be covered. It's not going to be a massive, for us as an agency, it's not going to make a massive difference to how we run as business now, apart from the abolishments of the Section 21 and the change of the contracts. Other than that, we do stick to these now. We don't refuse anyone who have pets. And we don't increase the rent just to cover because there's a pet in there, which that's another thing that you're not going to be allowed to do. You're not going to be able to say to a tenant, well, because you've got a dog, I want an extra £200 a month. That's not good. You're not going to be able to enforce that either.
I'm not sure how far down the road is that the applicant may have to take out an insurance policy. I know that was something that was discussed, but I know that it's not gone any further at the moment. But that is something that we could potentially look at further down the line, and that is that the person applying for that particular property will take out an insurance policy to cover any damage caused by the pet.
You can take an additional deposit, but you have to register it within the same deposit, but not have the deposit higher than the rental of the property, or 1 month's rent, 5 weeks. So there is ways around it. Again, it's just making sure that your agents and your staff are up to speed with everything.
Yeah.
The Decent Home Standards, it's a new standard within the private sector. It has always been in the social housing, but now they're bringing it over to here. Personally, I'm glad they are, because I think it will make landlords understand, not all landlords, but some landlords understand, if the properties are not up to standard, they are going to get penalised for it. And some properties that we've took over from an agency, from other agents or other landlords that haven't managed it to the required standards, on how they expect some of the people to live in these properties is just not acceptable. And as a company, we don't do that. We need to make sure that that property is safe, compliant, and the tenant is happy. That makes then a landlord happy, and the property is then well looked after. So there is going to be, as Craig mentioned earlier, more powers given to local councils so that they can empower. And again, the tenant is going to be able to go directly to the council and have the details on who they need to speak to and why and how. So I think it's about... Sorry. I
was just going to say, I think one of the important things here to understand is when you get this full turnkey service. So when an investor or a landlord is having a property sourced for them, and then they're having the refurb done, it's at that stage. I've been there, I've done it. I used to source properties. Well, we still do source properties, not on the scale like what we used to, but you know, we still source properties. We have our own in-house refurb team. Now, the importance of this is And this is something that I've never really understood. If you're paying anything between 30, 40, 50, 60, 70,000 pounds to have a refurb done on a property, whether it be a buy-to-let property or whether it be a HMO property, as an investor, you need somebody there that has your best interests at the forefront. Not somebody, you're not going to trust the builder to make sure that the builder is doing everything to the required standard. I've seen builders come and go 10 a penny, where they've turned up, they've done an absolutely amazing job. The finished article is phenomenal. However, behind that freshly painted wall, there's no damp proof. There's been no membranes put in. There's no insulation. And within a matter of 2 or 3 months, you've got damp coming through the walls and things like this. Now, G8, right from 2016, has always offered a service that we will go to a property once a week and we will make sure that your builders, whoever you've instructed, is doing the job properly. Because it used to infuriate me the fact that a lot of landlords and investors would spend that amount of money not to have the job done correctly. And we still do, not so much anymore, but we still get taken up on this service. The beauty of our in-house service is that they will always have work. Now, I met the guy probably 7 years ago. And the funny thing is it's actually Rebecca's husband. So I knew Rebecca's husband before I knew Rebecca. And I mean, Danny's always been a builder. It's all he's done for the past 35 years. And his standard of work, I put my name to. So when he goes in there and he says, this wall here needs tanking, this wall here needs slurry on it, this door needs replacing, I don't have any issues in coming back to my landlords and investors and saying, you need to get this done now. The problem occurs when the landlord or the investor turns around and says, well, do you know what? That takes me over budget slightly. So we won't do it at the moment. We'll do it further on down the line. Well, that just defeats the whole object, because you're going to end up having to do the majority of the refurb again, because you're just causing damage to the stuff that you're putting on. So we like to eradicate any problems right at the very beginning, so that once the refurb is done, you never have to do any work on it. It should almost be to the standard of a new build, where everything is completely done from scratch, and then we don't have any problems moving further on down the line. So from your point of view as the landlord or the investor, everything that you're making is profit. You're not having to put back into the house to to do your repairs and things like this. It kind of like just defeats the object from my point of view. So when we've got this decent home standards coming in, I know it's something that both Becky and I are really pleased is coming in, and we are really happy that the standards are going to be going up. But just, it's really, really important that as overseas investors or UK investors for that, a builder should be able to show you at least half a dozen standards of his work, houses that he's completed. He should be able to put you in touch with clients that he's worked for and things like this. Yes, we've heard the stories where the builder has given out his mate's email address and his mate's telephone number and things like this, but you need to go and get eyes on. You need to say to people like myself or Rebecca or somebody that in the UK, can you go and have a look at this property? Can you go and speak to these tenants and make sure that the house is as good as what this builder says? Because you only ever want to pay once. You don't want to be, shelling out all this money and then having to shell it out all again. And this is where the decent home standard comes in. Sorry, I got on my little rant then, didn't I, Becky? Because it's something that really does me in, that does.
It does, and we're just going to skip that, but we are going to touch base with it again with the new law that's coming. But we will skip on and just go to, I just want to run through a few of the grounds that is now going to be onto the Section 8 because they are abolishing. There is a lot of things on here that is still the same. The only change what I can see as of yet is the notice period. So that's more or less doubled, where at the moment, if you are, it's 2 months notice on a Section 21, it's going to be 4 months notice. Where a tenant had to be 8 weeks in arrears or more, now there have to be 3 months in arrears and more. So it's just the timescales that has changed. There is one thing that I do want to touch base on, and that is if a landlord does say, I want to sell my property, so I want my tenant out, yes, you can serve a Section 8 and give them 3 months notice. However, because because some landlords do want to sell it to be able to increase the rent, or because they don't like the tenant that's in there and they just want a new tenant. If a landlord seeks possession for a property and does it because he wants to sell the property, if he or she doesn't move into the property themselves and the property doesn't sell, you won't be able to rent that property back out for a further 12 months, because she's evicted a tenant on the proviso that the sale is going to go through. You're not going to be able to rent it back out if the sale falls through, or if you as a landlord doesn't move into that property. So that is going to be a big thing, where throughout the industry I've heard landlords saying, well, I want to sell, but really they're not. They're just wanting to gain possession to be able to up the rent, or they don't like the tenant. That is going to be a massive thing that you're not allowed to do. So in effect, your property is going to be empty for 12 months and you've lost 12 months worth of rent. So that is... And
we have had that. We have had that.
Yeah, definitely.
On Commercial Street, we had the exact same issue where a landlord, he wasn't happy with the 5%, which is why I was telling everybody about the landlord rescue package. He wasn't happy with the 5%, so he just said, right, evict them and put a new tenant in there, but increase the rent by 60, 70, 80 quid. You can't do that anymore.
No.
Which I think is a good thing.
Yeah, and I've just noticed it on here. I'm probably flitting a little bit back to student houses. I don't know if anyone has got any student accommodation. We don't as of yet, but it's not something that we're not going to look into. However, if you have a student house and you have 5 tenants in there, if all the documents are signed, because they generally are signed up 4 months prior to the tenancy starting due to the academic year, if one of them tenants decides that they don't want to move in because they've had a fallout with one of the house, or something happens and one of them doesn't want to move in, all of the tenants then haven't got a contract. So that means you have no tenancies in that house, and they all have to leave. So that is a big thing on the student accommodation. And if the agency allows someone else to take their place, they can do that, but it's got to be a brand new contract that's signed up with everybody on it. I'm just touching because I saw it on one of the slides. There is quite a lot on here. Obviously, we can send this out. Another thing as well with the Section 13s for rent increases, because it's not going to be a clause within the contracts, if your agency is filling out the Section 13s for you, you need to make sure that it is triple checked, and triple checked, because if it does go to court and anything is incorrect on that paperwork, it voids it totally, and you can't do another rent increase then for a further 12 months, and that initial rent increase won't take effect.
Paperwork is the key thing here.
Yeah.
Paperwork is, and we've always said this, and being an ex-military man myself, and Becky knows that I like processes, for procedures, and I'm going back a few years now. We had something rejected within court because we were 1 minute too early.
Yeah.
It was the time. Anything before 4:30 on a particular day, you had to do it the following day. And I put 4:30. It was actually 4:29, but I didn't want to be, coming across as being too precise. So I put 4:30, and it got thrown out of court and had to re-put it back into court. So it's small things like that. By 1 minute, by adding 1 minute to the time of the service, it got thrown out of court, and I had to reapply. And because that was my mistake and not my landlord investors, I paid for it. And this is the other thing that we are, very happy to do, and we're very open and honest about this, is that if we make a mistake, then we will resubmit the paperwork at our own expense, because it was our problem. We never charge anybody for doing something that wasn't their fault in the first place.
The big understanding as well with evictions and with paperwork, dependent on which local authority it is and depending on which area where the houses are, if there is a really, really high demand and there's no properties in the area for, if there is any evictions, the courts and the council are going to have that effect. So if us as agencies, they're going to try and trip us up as much as they possibly can, so that if we do something incorrect, it gives them more time so they don't have to rehouse that tenant, because it is going to be down to them, because they are going to be then classed as homeless unless they've got other alternative accommodation. But this is probably one of Craig's favourites, touching back on the damp and the awareness from the properties. Everyone, I think, may be aware of the tragic death of the 2-year-old from the damp and the mould that was in the property and how he lived. We're applied to the social housing in 2023, but it is now obviously when the Renters' Rights Bill is in there, and it was signed off at the House of Lords on the 21st of July 2025. So the rent repayment has been done. There's just little tweaks, and this is one of the things that are in there. So again, when you are buying a property, or if you have got properties already, making sure that your agent or you as a landlord are doing regular inspections, are documenting everything that's happening within the house to make sure that if something does arise, that it can be addressed immediately. With us as an agency, like Craig mentioned with the app, even then when it's reported, anything to do with damp, mould, we do send our team out straight to it just to check it before we even get a contractor there, to make sure that it's not going to affect the tenant living there. Because again, a little bit of more, it could be just one spot on the wall, but they could then go directly to the council, and the fines are just going to be ludicrous on what they are going to be putting out there.
Yeah, and I think also the important thing here to remember is just because somebody says that you've got damp in a property doesn't necessarily mean that you've got damp in the property. And I wasn't aware of this. It was something that Rebecca's husband, Daniel, told me about. What are them things called that he puts in the ceilings?
PIVs.
PIVs. Wow, what an amazing piece of kit they are. So they circulate the air within a property. So I'm going back probably 2 years now. I went to an investor who I actually knew on a personal level, and I said, look, you need to get your tenants out because your whole house needs basically stripping back to bare brick, and we need to find out where this damp's coming in. You know, there's black mold there and everything like this. It came up in conversation that I was having at Daniel. I think we were actually out walking our dogs at the time.
Yeah.
And Daniel said, oh, you need a PIV in there. He says it will sort it all out. So spoke to the investor. The investor straight away went, just get the PIV in there, put the PIV in there. And within 48 hours, it had already dried the walls out. Couldn't believe it. So then all that needed to happen then was all of the walls needed hoovering to get all of the mold particles off. Everything got rubbed down, repainted, and touch wood, since that date that the PIV went in there, there's been no problems at all. So that was...
It doesn't cost a mass amount to run either from the tenant's point of view with the electricity and things. I'm not 100% sure on the
like
cost.
2p a week.
Yeah.
2p a week is the machine. But if you know, and it's like what Danny said to me, that, you know, it would have, if it charged to do the damp, he would have been charging about £12,000 to damp proof the property. I think the PIV was something like 1,700 quid. It took a day to put in, you know, and that's supply and fit and paying the tradesman, the electrician and things like this. And it works like a dream. So as a company, we always look for the better alternative, the better option for you. It's not always, you know, just because somebody turns around and says it's damp, or the damp meter says the wall's damp. You know, we do look at other options to try, want to keep the price down for you because we don't want it affecting your investment. But also what is the best solution? You know, for me, I wanted that tenant out there. I didn't want him in a house full of mold and things like this. But Danny reassured me 48 hours, you know, it would all be sorted. And I just couldn't believe it. You know, so we do have you as the landlord and the investor's best interests at heart.
And not just going in and saying it is damp, you need to do this much, spend this much. You always need, is it the tenant that's not ventilating the house properly?
Yeah.
Is there a leak? Is it, and I think it's the investigation that needs to be had prior to know and understand. But just to make everyone aware that with the Renters' Rights Bill, a lot of tenants are going to have, or try to be one step ahead. But as long as the inspections are getting carried out, maybe like ourselves, it is law that every property has got to have an inspection every 6 months. As a company, we tend to do it every 3 months. We don't have to, but we do that to make sure that the properties are kept to a good standards. And if we don't do an inspection, we reach out to the tenants and ask for photographs. Is everything all right? So it's just about you telling your agency, or you as a landlord understanding what you want to make sure that you are going to keep yourself safe from any fines or any improvement notices.
Yeah.
Moving on. So the enforcement and the investigatory powers, that there is going, and I've mentioned it before, £7,000 for minor initial breaches, financial penalties for not compliant. Touching base on the database that all investors and landlords are going to have to register on, If you have a property in your name and then a property in your business name, you are going to have to register twice. So it can't just be under one. It's got to be under your personal name and under the business as well. If not, that can incur a fine. So that's something to watch out for. There is going to be criminal prosecutions if landlords and investors don't listen. There's going to be required information from landlords and relevant people to make sure that I've got my list here, the proof of ownership, proof of tax, proof of EPC, proof of the database. There's about 10 things that I'm going to be checking prior to even accepting any property on our books. And that's purely just to make sure that we are going to be covered and that landlord is covered prior to anyone moving into that house.
Yeah. So if you take back here, Becky, about whenever the council go out and do a HMO inspection, a compliance inspection, a single let inspection and things like this, not once does a property ever come back with no remedial works.
No, and one of our properties, buy-to-let properties, don't in effect have compliance checks on them. But if you have got a large single let property, a large buy-to-let property that the council could put, it has happened to us as an agency, and that's why I'm using it as an example. We've got a very large property that's a buy-to-let. From the outside of it, it looks like a 10-bedroom HMO, but it's a 4-bedroom house that should have been a HMO but isn't. So, but because the council are on their walkabouts looking for HMOs that are not licensed or running illegally, they presumed that this property was a HMO that was running illegally. They've not contacted us as an agency and they've just knocked on the door and asked to speak to the tenant. Obviously, when they've gone in there, it is just a buy-to-let, but it has still picked up on things that hasn't been correct within a buy-to-let, and it is some of it we can say it's tenant-like manner, but the council are saying that we need to put these things in place to make sure that that property is compliant, even if it is a buy-to-let, and even if a landlord thinks they're not going to do this because it is cosmetic and it's just for it to look better, the council will enforce, and they have done. And that, luckily for us, they have done a re-inspection and the council's done everything, and that's fine. So that has been signed off, but the council are going round housing estates, they are in this area massively, and in Doncaster, looking for properties that look like HMOs. And again, that goes down to the fact that the money that they do find, because there will potentially be one out there, the money that they do find, that landlord, is going straight into their pocket. Moving on, the rent repayment orders. So again, I think we've touched on this, and it is going to be, I think this is more Craig's than me, but
yeah, I think this is the special card that that any local authorities will play at any moment of any pushback from any landlord or any investor. So a rent repayment order is if you breach any compliance side of rental properties, or if you give a little bit of pushback towards any repair, or you don't do a repair to the required standard, rent repayment orders are very, very, very easy to be issued to a landlord. And I believe that this is how they are going to punish landlords, investors and agencies very, very easily and very quickly. So if we do something that is non-compliant, if we don't do a repair in a timely manner, if we don't do a repair to a good standard, they will just issue a rent repayment order. Now, for us as an agency trying to get our heads around this, we were astonished at how much money the council, the local authorities, can earn from this. And to give you an example, Becky was asked to go and have a look at a 10-bed HMO not so long ago, and it had 10 tenants in there, and not one tenant was on a contract. So that was 10 breaches. There was no EPC, gas safe certificates, right to rent checks, how to rent checks. There was none of that. So once we totted it all up, it was well over £100,000 that this one landlord had said that, if he'd been found out, he would have been fined that amount of money. So he just turned around to us and he said, I'm going to empty it. That's it. I'm selling it. Don't want anything to do with it. But he's still got his tenants in there. They work in his restaurant. So these are the things that just because, you know, the council are bringing these things into force, the bad landlords seem to always get away with it, and the good landlords always seem to be the ones that get punished. But I think the rent repayment orders, I think that is just going to be a big and a quick way to issue a fine and be done with it. If you continue to do the same thing over and over again, I think that's when you'll find yourself in court and you'll be issued with bigger fines. And heaven forbid, you know, I certainly never hope it happens to anybody, but they end up, you know, in prison. I think it's only going to be extreme circumstances where you would find that would happen. But
it is, but I think this goes back to then the initial refurb.
Yeah, everything goes back to the original refurb. Yeah.
Everything goes back to that. If that is done in the correct way, with the correct compliance, yes, you've got to maintain the tenant that's in there and make sure that it is managed correctly and they are looking after the property. But if that's done initially, there's not going to be a knock-on effect where it ends up with rent repayment orders and then landlords being imprisoned.
No, absolutely. And to give you a really simple explanation on this is the last 3 properties I purchased them very closely together. And I asked Daniel, Rebecca's husband, just to come and give some advice and things like this. And when I buy a property, I like to do the refurb because then I know it's done to my standard. We've now been managing these properties for a number of years, and it is only really basic remedial stuff that has ever been raised. You know, there was a bit of flaking paint in a kitchen. I honestly can't think of anything else off the top of me. Oh, a door frame had the hinge had come off. Yeah, the hinge had come off a door frame and things like this. And this is because I don't mind spending that little bit extra on getting the work right the first time. And you know, I think that's just really important that everything starts back at the refurb stage, and then you can move forward from there.
Yeah, and an understanding as well, though, back to the HMO licensing and the council inspections. The council HMO licensing is a different inspection to the compliance one. So they can pick different things up from different inspections. But if you make sure it's right to start with, then it's not going to be as bad.
That's right. We know what we're looking for. And we will always come back and say, you know, we've been out on a council inspection. They haven't raised this, but when they do their compliance inspection, they will raise it. So if you want us to do it now while we're doing these little bit of remedial works, we can do, or if you want to wait until it's raised, but we always make you aware. You know, the girls and the guys in the GA office that go out and do these inspections, they've got years and years worth of knowledge. Both myself and Becky invest a lot of money in them to make sure that they have the best training to the highest standard to make sure that we keep you, your property and your tenants safe. And if we can achieve all them 3, everybody's happy. I think that's the way to think about it.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Thank you so much, you both, for letting us know the latest on, you know, with the Renters Reform Bill and compliance. You know, can we conclude with, you know, some of the questions that I may have? So, for example, the bill is coming in. Then what can we do now to protect ourselves? You know, the first thing that that comes to mind is perhaps we should, you know, raise the rent to market value first, right? And then, so to avoid you guys, you know, it might be £400 from, I don't know, 6 years ago that it never got increased. Then it's much easier to increase in the future. So to just safeguard, you know, landlords that way. What are the other things that we can prepare ourselves, you know, in anticipation of the bill coming in?
I think to start off with, Jackie, what I would personally say is the service that Becky and I offer in the South Yorkshire area, the landlord rescue package. It's a free service that we offer. We go out and we can check everything for you, and we can make sure that you're achieving the correct rent, your house is to a good standard, your agency is doing a really good job, and things like that. That is a free service that we offer. That's not a problem at all. For anybody outside of the South Yorkshire area, I think what I would do is I would make a list of all of the things that we've mentioned and just go back to the agency and say, right, what is the average rent for this type of property? What is my rent? Why is mine not at that rent? Have a look at what maintenance jobs have been raised, what maintenance jobs keep being raised that are the same, because whatever is being repeatedly raised means that it's not being done correct the first time. So the housing standards is a massive one. That is the one that they're going to be able to really get you on. That's where you're going to get your rent repayment orders. That's where you're going to get tenants complaining and going to the local authorities, and then that's when it's going to get the local authorities involved. I think that's where I would start personally.
All right. So, the first thing is people can, compare the market rent and the rent they're getting now, because increase will be much more difficult in the future when the bill comes in. And two, now, Craig and Rebecca is offering this what's it called? Landlord Rescue Package?
Landlord Rescue Package. Yeah, we call it a Landlord Rescue Package because what we used to do was when we were looking for additional properties, we were putting it out there to sort of say, look, we'll come and rescue your property for you, and then we'll take on management. But now, because we know that it's all about making sure that all the properties in the area are at the same standard, we just offer it. You know what I mean? We send out checklists that you can send on to your current management company, and they can send you a copy of the how to rent, the right to rent, and things. The government are very clever, Jackie. They change documents, but they don't always necessarily change the dates on the documents. They change the wording within the documents. So
this is one of the things that got mentioned as well yesterday, that with the Renters' Rights Bill, there's not going to be a big banner spread out there to say, right, today's the day, this is when it's going to happen. It is literally just going to be a click of a finger, and that will be it. So there'll be no, we're doing it on this date, we're doing it on that date. They literally will implement it, and the changes will happen immediately.
Well, I think it's good that, we are having this, webinar telling us, these things, because, there's quite a lot of changes, and there's quite a lot of, regulation that are coming into force. Now, I'm sure, some tenants will be as savvy as we are, that we are, looking at this in this detail. But I think it will take time for them to propagate, for every, tenant to know, right, this is the common knowledge. If you're unhappy with this, go to this place. So I think we're in a good place, that we are quite early in the whole thing.
There is one thing I have forgot. Sorry, Craig, what I did forget to touch base on that I've just looked at my notes is taking rent in advance. So you're not going to be able to take rent in advance once the Renters' Rights Bill is in place. So if a tenant says to you, I want to pay you 6 months, you can take that, but it has got to come from the tenant. You, as an agency or a landlord, cannot ask for rent in advance. You've got to make sure that you are saying to that tenant, this is a month-to-month contract. I want from you your deposit and 1 month. If they offer to give you 6 months, they can. However, if then they decide that they're going to give you 2 months notice, but they have paid 6 months, the landlord is going to have to pay them funds back.
That's crazy. That imagine all these international students.
Yeah.
And how are you going to let it to them? You are not going to let to a foreign national. If this guy go back to wherever this person's from, then you can never get the money back. Then how can you lend it to this person?
I think the safest thing to do, and yes, we can take the money up front if you know that there's going to be that tenant is going to be a long-standing tenant. Yeah, it is difficult to gauge, but as an agency for us, we have been very good at the fact that we know if it's going to be a tenant that's short-term. We get to know that person, who they are and how long they're planning on staying in the UK. However, I would just base it on the fact that you're getting rent every month, and don't focus on the fact that you want 6 months in advance. As long as you're getting your rent every month and that tenant's paying every month, you're getting an income every month. If they do put the 2 months notice in, which sometimes can happen now, where someone puts a notice in, I'm going to leave on the 1st of July. They put the notice in on the 1st of, I'm going to leave on the 1st of August, but they leave midway through. They're leaving without paying the bills. But now it is going to be within the Renters' Rights Bill that the tenant does have to pay the bills, utilities, including council tax, all the utilities, gas, electric, water, and the rent up to the day that they actually move out. So that is a good thing for landlords, that they're not going to be able to just walk away without paying the bills. That will be enforced.
What I envision something happening would be these guarantors company where they take the rent up front, or a collateral, whatever it is, right? And then, which is a full year's rent, and then they guarantee, this person from overseas is going to pay because they've got, this balance in their account. So I think just chaos, really. Just making a rent.
I did hear something quite quite worrying about rent to rent. I never really did get on with rent to rent. We had a lot of landlords and investors come to us and say, would you take our property on a rent to rent? And I kind of like disagreed with what they were asking us to do. However, now what it looks like is that the government don't recognise a rent to rent scheme. So if let's say somebody wants to rent a property off of me, rent to rent, and they guarantee me £400 a month, and I go back to you and I say, Jackie, this guy's going to give us £350 a month, so I make £50, you get your £350 rent. If there is a fine, there's only me and you that gets fined. The guy doing the rent to rent, who's managing the property, doesn't get anything.
All right, because he isn't a subject, right? As
Exactly.
law.
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. That's an interesting notion. We've got some questions here from the audience. So, a person asked, a landlord needs to choose one applicant to be the tenant. Does it mean the landlord still have chance to select one of them, but at the same time has to provide reason in a letter to those who are not selected? How does the process work? This person is saying, if you've got loads of applicants for the tenancy, say 5, right, you're obviously going to pick one. Do you have to tell a reason for the other 4 that you are being rejected for a specific reason?
Yeah, it's just exactly the same way as we would do it now. So one of the girls in the office would just phone them up and sort of say, I'm sorry, but in this situation, you've been unsuccessful. We would not have to explain why they've been unsuccessful. We would just keep it short, sharp, straight to the point. I'm sorry, this time you were unsuccessful.
It's a bit like, when you personally don't like a particular type of tenant, you're not allowed to say, I don't want you because of X, Y, and Z. For example, in the case of pets, or you have a dog, so that's why I can't give you. But you can still select people. So it's another way of choosing.
Absolutely. And every morning, and I'm party to these meetings via Zoom and things like this, I hear the girls having a conversation with Becky and they're saying, right, I've got 3 applicants for this property. Can I just run you through them? And collectively, as a team, they pick the best tenant. So they go through all the pros, all the negatives, and they just pick the best tenant.
Sometimes it is very difficult when there is a lot of applicants that have applied, and it is very difficult. And we do have some occasions where a tenant will say, oh, well, I'll pay an extra £100. And that's something that, again, no, we don't do that. And it is difficult to pick and say, I'm sorry to the other 4. But if I had another 4 houses, I could put them 4 in them houses.
I think what would likely to happen if the rent is, I don't know, £800 to £1,000, for example, and then there's no bidding war allowed, right? And people are just going to ask 900 to, 1,000 and, 1,100 just to, anticipate. At best I can give you a discount, but it's already an inflated advertising price. So I can see people doing that in the future.
Yeah.
We've got...
Most definitely.
Yes. So Kerry asked, if damp and mold were caused by the tenants, is it still the landlord's responsibility to fix it?
Yes.
Yeah.
So if they don't open the window after a bath or they extract the fan, then
you've got.
And all I can say to that is,
nice.
That is the importance of your inspections. You can educate tenants, okay, and we can warn them what the repercussions could be. We have in our contract, any damage caused by a tenant will be paid for by the tenant. In a court of law, it probably wouldn't stand because you can't prove that the tenant did actually do that. However, if they are not putting the extractor fans on in the bathrooms when they're showering, so we've all seen them, and I used to be quite a big advocate of them. In a HMO, you have the isolating switch on the outside of the ensuite. We've got rid of all of them.
We do not. So you have to turn it on.
You have to. As soon as they turn that light on, the fan comes on.
That's what I do.
The fact that it's noisy when they get up in the middle of the night and they go to the toilet. Well, I'm sorry, that's not my problem. My problem is I don't want to create mold and damp and things like that. So that's and the other thing as well is you can have a trickle vent in a window. And if you've got the old-fashioned windows, you can actually have them trickle vents put in. So,
or like you say, put the positive pressure system in, then it's perfect.
Yeah.
Right. She's got a follow-up question saying, having a pet is not allowed by my management company. Does renter right bill apply to them too? Not sure what exactly the question is, but to my understanding is, go on in.
I was just going to say, does she mean if it was like a block that's managed by a company, so like a student block, they don't allow pets within it anyway? Is that still gonna? I'm
Oh,
presuming.
right,
Block,
yeah.
block
I know
management.
what it means.
Yeah.
For the block management.
Again, I don't think they can enforce it where they can't have any pets. I think it is going to have to be then down to the company of the building to then
Yeah.
provide evidence as to why it's not safe to have have the pets in the property.
So it's not 100%. Still
No.
up to debate, huh?
Still a lot of very grey areas there, and these are the things that they are going to have to iron out.
Okay. Do you know when it's coming through? Like this year, for sure, right? Been
They're
talking
saying
about
100% this year, but it's been
That's
delayed
what,
a few times.
that's what they all say.
Yeah.
I think they're looking at the beginning of October. Well,
Well,
we've got things in place now, and everything will be completed by October. So if it does, we're ready.
all right. Okay. Right. Any more questions to Craig and Rebecca regarding the Renters Reform Bill? Craig and Rebecca is very it's very forward in terms of the bill. They also train other agency and agents on compliance. So they're really really hot on compliance. So if you've got some questions after, I encourage you to get in touch, especially with their landlord rescue package. It's free. They're just to quick audit on your stands really when this comes into force. So you're protected. All right then. If there's no more questions, then thank you so much, Greg, for Rebecca for coming on and sharing this with us.
Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. You too. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Speak soon. Bye bye.
好，大家問題有冇問我關於呢個標嘅？我覺得佢有啲嘢係講唔聽嘅，即係諗下如果嗰個依家唔俾一次過俾租，咁你諗下嗰啲海外學生咁點算？唔好講海外學生咁遠先啦，你講 BNO 先啦，好冇？你 BNO 一開頭去啲人唔係話要俾6個月、12個月租嘅，依家唔俾你，咁你點租啊？係咪？咁喂你啊隨時就走㗎咯喎，咁啊隨時翻香港咁嗰個業主梗係唔租俾你啦，係咪？你掉翻轉都一樣㗎，係咪？即係依家唔好講 BNO 啦，另外一個海外嘅人嚟租你嘅層樓，佢就隨時走㗎啦，咁樣咁你租唔租俾佢啊？你梗係唔租俾佢啦，係咪？咁你有冇12個月租先？咁依家又唔得喎，要佢提出喎，咁樣所以就呢個 tricky 咯。Carrie 就問 What is no DSS ever？DSS 係攞簡單嚟講，用中文嘅 term 就係攞綜援嘅人係啦。咁就以前係可以咁樣嘅，以前就話 no DSS 嘅，即係你攞福利又唔租俾你嘅。咁依家就唔得咯，係啦。哇，好耐之前都唔得㗎啦，即係你歧視佢咁樣，咁你亦都可以揀嘅，即係你冇歧視啫，但係你可以唔揀佢㗎嘛。OK 係啦，咁依家就即係佢放大咗咯，依家有寵物都唔可以因為寵物嘅原因而咩咯，係咯咁樣。以前就 DSS 唔可以放㗎啦，你放俾人鬧到飛起㗎，係啦。PIV 係嗰個上堂都有講嘅，叫做 positive pressure system，就係即係 Covid 嗰陣，香港醫院咪有啲負壓房嘅，咪話唔夠嘅，負壓就係啲菌唔好擠出去啊嘛，咁就 positive pressure 掉翻轉去正壓嘅，咁就喺嗰個天花度咧裝部機嘅，有部機嘅，咁嗰部機都唔係太平價，都千幾磅價，咁即係佢就不斷打氣嘅喺間屋裏邊，咁打啲氣就有幾個好處嘅，一咧你夏天嗰陣咧就好熱噶嘛，咁佢會有少少風嘅，係啦。之後如果你係冬天嘅話咧，你通常開暖氣嗰啲暖氣咪滴咗上去嘅，即係啲熱空氣向上啊嘛。咁其實你有啲風吹一吹咧，會搞嗰啲空氣就令到間屋更加暖嘅。其實咁嗰個就做呢個作用啦。同埋第三就係，譬如有啲濕氣，例如有啲人沖涼啊唔開抽氣扇咁樣樣，咁佢就會即係佢會排出嗰啲氣排出個屋出邊嘅。咁裝咗係舒服好多嘅，你一入去你就知㗎啦，即係你入去你 feel 到嘅。係啊，咁就裝咯。咁佢又話咩一個禮拜2 P 啊，咁平，我唔知係咪啊？我諗平就平嘅，因為你整呢嚿嘢係要慳電㗎嘛。其實佢有一個好靜嘅風扇，咁佢就咁啊吹啲氣出嚟咯。咁就有啲管咁樣樣就喺個天花嗰度走，就每一間房有個嘢嘅。裝咗係好好多㗎，係啊，即係如果你依家喺英國嘅話，你裝我都幾正舒服㗎。Angus 就問 For overseas student is rent to rent a good solution having 12 months rent upfront but the head lease may not allow it。係啊，我覺得係一個問題嚟㗎。咁啊點啊？你而家海外學生又唔俾租樓喎，你都唔知點搞，係咪？即係你又點啊？你 ban 咗過去唔可以租俾你喎咁啊？即係我覺得其實即係有啲太短視咯。我覺得呢個政策即係有啲唔係好 work 嘅。我覺得有啲位，所以佢先搞咁耐都推出唔到㗎嘛，係啦。咁佢話今年100%得，唔知得唔得？Student Let 會唔會變得好複雜？預唔到佢幾時走，好大機會 back to back。係啊，所以佢就話 即係佢話啦，依家仲未定啦。佢就話 student 有機會係 exempt，因為你 student 係9月至9月噶嘛，即係 whatever 啦，summer to summer 啦，7月至7月咁樣樣。咁你啊租咗9月，咁之後你又去到12月話 fail 咗，咁你唔讀啦咁點搞啊？咁梗係唔得啦。So 佢就話有機會 student 係會 exempt 嘅，係啦。咁係咯，之前咪有個新聞嘅嗰個有個大臣又係做 housing 嘅，又係 push 呢一個，之後咪又係話自己賣樓之後又 evict 咗個 tenant，之後又冇搬入去啊嘛。有個新聞嘅又係佢嗰啲做政策嗰啲自己都有樓嘅，係啦，所以佢先搞咁耐啫。但係如果真係按呢個咁樣係問題嚟㗎學生嘅話，which is 我唔覺得會發生咯，係啦，呢個我嘅諗法。Quan Ming Luke, what does the impact of the property market from this? Less people buying。我覺得有一部分人會離開個市場嘅，係啦，即係聽完就話唔搞啦咁樣樣，咁啲租肯定 rock 嘅。依家其實我見到好多新聞都喺度個租金一路升嘅，咁再加埋呢一個咧，我覺得即係佢其實想保護租客啫嘛，咁保護租客之後你咪要俾好貴嘅錢咯，咁留得住喺度嘅你就你就 benefit 啦。其實呢件事唔係第一次發生嘅，嗰個2013年嗰個 Section 24就係嗰個即係個人名利息不可扣減啊嘛，啲人咪轉公司咯，之後有啲人咪走咗咯。咁走完之後就依家好 pro 嘅個，即係你依家梗係識啲個咩叫個人名公司名買啦，但係你新入嚟嗰啲人佢都好 confused 㗎，你上網啲人又講得唔清唔楚，係咪咁所以就 professional 咗個 market 之後就其實唔越嚟越難㗎，我覺得咁所以你哋越嚟越 pro 就喺度咯。Amanda 就話9月第2個禮拜開始，之後就話個租客就6個月 upfront，唔關你事啦。依家個法例都未推出，你待咗6個月就啱㗎啦。係啊，啱啊，好啊。Sunny 聽，what is the name of the installation just mentioned？佢話係 PIV，係啦，positive，我知道叫做 positive pressure 嘅，係啦，一部機嚟嘅。我睇下可唔可以上網揾俾你啊。Positive input ventilation 啊，PIV 啊。哦咁嘅，我上堂都有睇過嘅呢個啊，咁樣嘅有部機嘅，之後就喺度擠啲氣出嚟咯。咁嘅係啦，一部黃色嘅機，即係每間房你就整呢嚿嘢咯，要拉嗰啲管㗎。咁但係成件事係唔一樣嘅。我入過去，尤其是夏天嗰陣咧，好舒服嘅，舒服好多。Christopher would SA becomes more preferred under this bill？係啊，啲人會擠咗出去咯。咁你識做 SA 咪做 SA 咯，你識做 housing association 咪做咯。係啊，所以好多 housing 搶走㗎。你冇咗呢件事唔關你事啊，根本你租5年7年。政府得翻 social housing 同埋 SA 可以少啲煩惱。依家佢又未100% 立法，你等佢搞成點先？肯定啲人好多嘈㗎啦，係咪？即係連呢兩個人咧係 train 好多嗰啲 agents 嘅。我點解識得佢？就係有人就話介紹，就係話喂佢識得好多嘅。咁因為嗰啲公司佢都要為嗰個老細都要知道發生咩事，同埋 train 佢啲員工㗎嘛，係咪？話依家呢個新嘅啦，呢個新例啦，大家照住咁做啦，咁佢就會有呢啲咁嘅 training 嘅。咁同埋 agents 佢哋自己都有 compliance 㗎嘛，咁佢哋都要上堂啊，不斷 update 啊咁樣，咁就佢哋就做呢個 training 嘅，所以佢哋行得好前嘅，係啦。所以有啲咩奇靈雜症咧，我第一個揾佢先嘅，係啦，你點睇？係啦。Vincent Chua 就話：我屋企有，係啊，你覺得點啊？你打幾句，你個 review on 呢個 system 覺得好定唔好啊？係咪啲電費真係好貴咧？因為佢成日開住。Sunny 就話：佢話另外個租金一早要 increase，唔係好難加。點解？係咪真係唔可以跟 market？佢 Section 13係最多加5% 啊嘛，係咪？咁如果你 market 係1000嘅，你又600，咁啊600加5%都係30磅啫，咁你加唔翻去1000咯。佢意思係咁，即係你一未做咧，快啲加咗先，係啦。咁加到 market 啦，之後你到時就即係跟佢玩咯，係啦。咁係啦，Vincent 打唔打得切？Vincent 咧就話佢裝咗喺2、3樓樓梯幾好，我覺得幾好㗎，係啊，即係啲 premium 嘢嚟嘅，係啦，即係靚啲嘅嘢嚟嘅，係啦，即係你自己屋，我覺得我會裝咯，係啦。Tenant 屋就睇下你想唔想裝，個電費都係佢俾嘅，係咪？係啦，咁但係可以防止佢即係唔開抽氣扇嗰啲咯，係啊。